So this is a completely different talk to the ones we've had so far. I'm going to tell you a story about a very simple mathematical or simplistic mathematical model of an evolving population, and the moral of the story is that noise is really, really important. So the reason this talk has two titles is because of my esteemed collaborator Alan. So I wanted to call our paper Survival of the Unfit, but he quite wisely thought that that was a preposterous title, and so we've gone for a much more sensible one. So if you were going to try and explain population dynamics and evolutionary modelling to your grandmother, you might start with a simple sort of explanation along these lines. I'm going to lose. My slides aren't quite going to fit, are they? There we go. Right, so the driving forces are mutation and competition. So we need mutation to introduce subtle variations between parents and offspring so that a population can explore possible different strategies that are different from the parents. And we need competition to decide which of those strategies are the best somehow. So the ones that live the longest have more offspring, and they will eventually take over a population. So people have tried to produce mathematical models of these. There are lots of very similar ones. My personal favourite goes back to McArthur and Levins, but the ideas are so sort of broad that a lot of different people have tried similar things. So the idea is we define our organism by its position in niche space, or niche space, depending how you say it. So I'm a mathematician, so I'm not embarrassed to say that niche space is the line segment minus pi pi with periodic boundary conditions. The organisms reproduce asexually at a constant rate, so they just keep on having kids. And each of these children has a small chance of mutation and being slightly different from its parent. Death is caused by competition between these organisms in the population, and the key factor is that competition is stronger between more similar organisms, because the theory is they exploit their environment in similar ways. Okay. So we imagine this process happening to billions of organisms, and we want to model the average change in the population density over time. So if we introduce some notation for this, maybe I have a point x in niche space, and I say the population density is phi. And then there's a strength of competition, so this depends on some function g that depends on the distance between these two things in niche space. So it's a positive function that's decreasing as distance goes away. And there's a factor 1 over k. K is the carrying capacity. So the larger k is, the smaller the overall effect of competition, the less death there is, the larger the population can grow. Reproduction with rate 1, and a small mutation parameter mu. So you put these ingredients together and you might write down something a bit like this. So this is quite a simple equation really. So we have the rate of change of population density, and it depends on, we've got a positive birth term, we've got a diffusive term for the mutation, for things spreading out in time, and then we've got this death that's caused by competition. And in order to die, somebody at point x has to meet somebody at point y, and then there's a chance that the guy at y will eat him. And so I have to then integrate over all the possible other people I might meet. Okay. Well, fantastic. So I've written down a model. Well, what next? What can I do with this? So what I'd like to do is use this to make predictions about the characteristics of the populations that will evolve in these sort of models. People have studied these questions for a really long time, and one of the frameworks that's quite popular is called adaptive dynamics. So this is a systematic formalization for evolutionary modeling, and it's based on the analysis of fitness, and fitness in a really specific mathematical sense. So in our model, we could rewrite that equation and suck most of the complicated stuff going on, suck it up into this function s, which is the fitness. Or sometimes it's called the invasion fitness. So it's the chance if I have a new person who arrives at point x, we say what's the per capita growth rate for that guy who's just arrived. And it's this term here. Okay. So the adaptive dynamics literature is very big, but you can boil it down to some quite simple rules that this population should follow. And they all seem to make sense. So species should move uphill in S over time. Populations should become more fit as time goes on. Species that are at fitness maxima are stable. So if I happen to occupy a location in niche space where everything around me would be less fit, then I have no incentive to move. And species at fitness minima are unstable and will bifurcate. So I'm going to do something I really shouldn't. I'm going to try and show you some simulations to demonstrate this. So let's have a go. Right. So these black blobs, there we go, that'll do. These black blobs are my members of my population. They're living for some random amount of time and they're having some children. The children have little perturbations to them. They're slightly different from their parents. I've got a curve here describing the carrying capacity at different points in niche space. So the guys who are born by chance further uphill will live slightly longer and will have slightly more kids, and their kids have a chance of being born even further uphill. Okay? So this blob, this population, over time is evolving itself uphill, and hopefully it's going to find magic number 1. I don't know how long we have to wait. And then depending how long we're prepared to wait, I'll just tell you. So once it's got there, it doesn't have any kind of incentive to move. So this blob is going to wobble around, but it's going to stay pretty much on 1. You can also see what happens to the population. So it started off about 100. It's now about 200. So by going uphill, it's had the chance to produce more of it. This population has got larger, and it's now more or less stabilized at the top there. I'll stop that. Okay, so the first 2 rules I've demonstrated, more or less. Species move uphill over time, and when they reach a maxima, they're stable. So what about the next one? Fitness at minima will bifurcate. AD2. Okay, here's a little population that is very unlucky and is living in this fitness well. So you can see initially the population size decreases quite rapidly, but then over time the mutations are spreading out, exploring their local neighborhood, and eventually some of these guys are going to find these edges where things are a lot more favorable. And hopefully, there we go, thank goodness, it's split into 2. So we could now say that speciation has occurred. We now have 2 phenotypically distinct species that have migrated to favorable fitness positions. Okay, all going well so far. All right, so now back to our model. So in those simulations I just showed you, I fixed the fitness landscape. It was that red curve that I had written. Okay? But the model, we were talking about the fitness coming from the interaction between the organisms. So they were competing with each other and killing each other. So suppose we have a killing function with this arbitrary sort of shape. So there's some kind of interaction range where if I run into another organism that's sufficiently similar to me, I'll have a good chance of killing him. Okay? So you turn the handle on the adaptive dynamics sort of toolkit, and what it tells you, it gives you a prediction for what's going to happen to these kind of populations. It says they're going to spread out over time and keep bifurcating until eventually a stable configuration is reached, where we have some number of species that are more or less equidistantly spaced, and they're all optimally fit. So, can we do that in the model? So now the red line is wobbling around because fitness depends on the exact details of the population through this killing function, and hopefully, everyone cross their fingers, we're going to get a bifurcation. Yep, that looks good. But still, okay, so life has got slightly better for these 2 species, and you can see that by the fact that the population size has more or less doubled. So these guys, they've split in 2, and then they've moved far enough apart that they don't really feel the other group anymore, so they can grow back to the original size of the first group. But still, life isn't perfect. You can see this fitness landscape has a slightly weird shape to it. And so they're spreading out some more, and what I really hope is going to happen is we'll get a 3rd one soon. We may have to wait all night. This is evolutionary timescales, all right? Okay, look, so things are getting better now. Okay, here we go, here we go. Nearly there. Nearly there. Honestly, it did it a lot quicker when I practiced. No, okay, so this is pretty good. This is pretty good. So we have 3 more or less equidistantly spaced species, and they happen to be sitting at maxima of the fitness landscape. Okay? So these are now very robust. These are very stable populations. None of them has any real incentive to change, because if I have a mutation that comes over here, I'm going to be down in one of these wells, and so I'll probably die out quickly. So there we go. So everything's working fantastically well, so hooray for adaptive dynamics. But the idea we had was this idea of direct killing maybe isn't the main sort of mechanism that goes on in the real world. You don't sort of just kill people for no reason. Oh, sorry, I should say here's a much longer time series in case you need convincing, so you reach these nice little regular peaks. So usually organisms compete for something. So they might, for instance, be fighting over food. So suppose there's some sort of resource, like food, that's uniformly distributed in niche space, And this time my function g, instead of describing the rate that I randomly go out and kill people, maybe it describes the rate that I can find and exploit food in my local area. So you might think birds and the size of their beak and the sort of seeds they can eat. So maybe another bird comes along and his beak is slightly shorter than mine, so he eats slightly different seeds, but there's some kind of overlap. So we're going to fight for some of the same seeds. So you do a sort of back of the envelope calculation and you find that what you should write down for the new killing function is a convolution. So basically you have to integrate over all of the different resources you could exploit with how much each of you are fighting for that resource. Okay. So let's do a simulation with that kernel. Right, now this one takes a lot longer, so I might just leave it running while I do the rest of the talk and we can come back to it. Yeah, I think I better. I hope my computer can cope. So what does adaptive dynamics predict in this case? Well, interestingly enough, when you have a killing kernel that has this convolution shape where you're fighting for a resource, it predicts that no arrangement of species will ever be stable. So there's no optimally fit arrangement that's possible. The best you can do is to have a never-ending process of bifurcation, because nobody's ever fit. So all species always bifurcate and try and explore, and eventually you end up with a completely uniform population density with all different types represented. So all different lengths of beak if you're a bird. Let's see what the simulation's doing. Oh, there's two. Okay. Right. So these two, we think more should they should spread out more, right? Our theory is good so far, so they should carry on spreading out, and they don't appear to occupy nice places in the fitness landscape, so there should be some pressure on these guys to spread out and explore different strategies, and we're expecting eventually to see a uniform distribution. Well, actually that doesn't happen. So this screenshot is from a longer simulation run, again with an indirect competition where they're fighting over a resource. And I hope you believe me, I could carry this on for a lot longer, but here 5 species are formed and they stay there, they're stable in some sort of a sense. And they're not fit. Look, these guys, you know, they don't occupy maxima of the fitness landscape. These are unfit species that have survived somehow. And my explanation is that it's the demographic noise that's preventing them from bifurcating. So I'll check on our simulation. Yep, still, you know, these are not happy, stable species, and yet they persist. And if I just showed you this screenshot from the middle one, you wouldn't know whether these were two lovely, fit species that were exploiting their environment perfectly, or whether it's one of this sort of weirdness, where the noise is holding it together. Oh, we've got bifurcation. Right. So here's my explanation. I'll see if you buy it or not. So you think about two competing explanations for the same thing that's going on. Okay, so on the left-hand side, imagine a single father organism and all of its progeny over time. So the daughter organisms are going to spread out with each generation occupying more and more different locations in niche space. So that family tree is getting wider and wider in niche space. Okay? So park that, and then now think of this alternative process where if I gave you the population at a point in time, or a sample of it, you could play this game where you draw the phylogenetic tree. So you take the two most closely related guys and you join them together according to their last common ancestor. And you keep doing that. Okay? And eventually you'll find a single common ancestor for everybody in the population. And the question is, how far back do you have to look to find a single common ancestor? And how spread out could your population have become in that time? And if you have quite a small population, then you don't have to look very far back in time. So you haven't had much of an opportunity to spread out and explore niche space, and you end up stuck in these blobs like this instead of spreading out. So that's the intuition, I think. You can do some mathematics. I won't subject you to that now. The basic outline is you write a master equation for the stochastic process that underlies the model. You can do an expansion in large carrying capacities in the form of a Fokker-Planck equation that describes the stochastic evolution of the population density. And then a stability analysis of the Fourier coefficients of that equation gives you an idea of which kind of waves are unstable. So if you want a picture, so the idea is the population density is the Fourier modes of the population density are excited by noise, and some of them are excited more than others, and some of them are damped more than others. And we can compute which modes are the least stable, and therefore the most likely to be excited. So here, the fifth mode is the least stable, and lo and behold, we have 5 species. So I know that's a horrible sketch, but it's all I have time for. So here's the summary. When organisms kill each other directly, stable species form, and adaptive dynamics does a great job of predicting what they will be. But when you have this kind of indirect competition for a resource, which is probably more common in the real world, species still form against the prediction of adaptive dynamics, but they tend to have low fitness. And this is a consequence of demographic noise, and some of the features of the population are predictable. So the take-home message is, even though the fittest individuals survive the longest and have the most offspring, it does not follow that the species as a whole is optimally fit, at least in this simplistic model. So if you want to read more, and who wouldn't, here are some references. And yeah, thank you very much.
I want to ask, the same model was approached in a non-stochastic setting by Illenberg and Messina about 10 years ago, and they saw a phenomenon by which, if they went away from a convolution kernel and simply they looked at it in terms of structural stability, where they said basically they got away from something which was a simple kernel with one sort of essentially like a radial-based kernel, and instead considered just an arbitrarily small perturbation, they could also get this same sort of splitting into eigenmodes, essentially. I'm curious, what's the relation between their work and your work?
Yeah, okay, and there's also a particular case of that is the Gaussian kernel, because it sits right on the boundary of stability. So this was our first sort of route into this problem. The long story short is, at a mathematical level, the predictor for species to form at a deterministic level is to do with the Fourier coefficients. And that's a kind of a really sort of abstract thing that you couldn't really assess from a microbial population or anything like that, right? So our question was, why is there this sort of weird distinction between pattern forming and non-pattern forming, species forming, non-species forming in a deterministic model that we don't see in the real world? And it's actually the role of noise sort of enhances this species forming tendency. So we would claim probably that the stochastic analysis solves that riddle.
Yeah, I'm not sure you don't see those things in the real world. That's another discussion. But so I do believe that there are bacterial species which do look like that. That's common.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That look like what?
That they have multiple. They have black. That they're divided into a large number of things. Which are somewhat stable.
Yeah, okay. No, so I should say we agree with you there probably. So that was so I've given one side of this story, and then the reverse side is when does this effect not present itself? And that would be when you have very, very large populations and you have enormous carrying capacities, then the speciation tendency is suppressed. You don't look like you agree with me.
I don't think they're that large.
Bacterial populations. Okay, well that's how long is a piece of string? We can we can discuss that.
There's some very classic ecological work by George Evelyn Hutchinson. I don't know whether you've heard of him. He's one of the founding fathers of ecology, and he looked at pigeons. He said, well, if you look at pigeons, they differ in size, and there are the specific distances between the sizes of the different pigeons. You have 5 species, and they double in size each time. What would your theory tell about such aspects? What is determining the distance between the different phenotypes? And can you say something about diversity in this term?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, if you knew the way that those different species interacted, then you might hope to reproduce that observation. But I'm always very tentative about approaching real biological examples because there's a whole world of detail that I wouldn't want to comment on, right? but I'll look it up. That's an interesting example. Thank you. Okay.